Everyone that's on now, I'd like to welcome you to today's kickoff of our 6-week Alexander Technique series. My name is Gail Tamarchio. I'm the Director of Wellness Initiatives for Friends Life Care, and we are thrilled that you are here with us today. I think you'll be very happy that you invested your time this morning in this class. It's taught by Ariel Weiss, who has been a certified Alexander Technique instructor since 1988. And she is an expert on how the human body should move. And I think by the time you finish today, you will all be feeling, standing a little taller and feeling like we're moving a little bit easier. Ariel works with performing artists, she works with seniors, she works with all different populations, and she can specialize her programs to the different groups. So Ariel, we are thrilled to have you here today. I'm gonna turn the show over to you.
Thank you so much, Gail, and thank you to Friends Life Care for their in providing this program. I'm thrilled to be able to speak as such a large number of you. And Gail, I'm going to go ahead and mute you because I'm getting a little feedback. So we're just going to do a little orientation to start. And I want to just have you all navigate on your screens. If you find me, I'm going to wave my hand so you can see me. You can go to the 3 pins at the top and you can pin my video. So you should be able to see me. And this is my trusty assistant, Fred, if you can see him. He's dressed for the occasion. Sorry, I kicked my table a little bit. All right, so that's how you can see me. I want to direct your attention to the bottom of the screen. If you click on the chat icon, which is that little screen icon, you can put your questions in there, and Gail's going to help me out by keeping track of those. And I just want to orient you to one more feature, which is all the way on the right, next to the Leave button, there's a Reactions button. And if you click on that, there's 2 choices. There's a thumbs up icon, and that means I'm with you. And then there is a kind of hand up icon, right? So I may ask you, like we're gonna give it a test run. If you can hear me okay, I want you to go ahead and put the thumbs up icon so we can get a kind of read on the room, so to speak. Terrific, thank you for that. Excellent. Great. So today is going to be largely to introduce you to me and to Mr. Alexander's discoveries and what they're all about. We're not going to move a whole lot today. And I just want you to know that this class is mostly about kind of mindful movement. So there's no need for workout clothes. You are going to want to have a high chair with a back for some balance work. Probably not next week, but the week after. We're going to go through a whole arc and address some of your questions. I've already seen people saying they're interested in balance and better posture, and those are certainly things we'll address. So I've decided to make a PowerPoint. There's so many of us. I'm going to kind of hop in and out of that PowerPoint, and I'm going to start my story by telling you about me a little bit. So I started training to dance when I was 4 years old, and by the time I got to college, I was working super hard, but I had built up quite a lot of tension in all my working hard. And I went to a workshop about the Alexander Technique. And in that workshop, the teacher helped me to balance on one leg. So here's the funny thing about balancing on one leg. Dancers spend their whole lives training to do that. And I'm actually going to show you a little bit what happened to me. The language in a dance class is that actually I'm going to give you a little bit more of my body so you can see, because we do this funny thing where we lift a knee up. Hi, Fred. But this is called passe when I lift my knee up, right? And then we usually put our hands in some kind of port-de-bras. So I wasn't very good at balancing. I was an okay dancer, but balancing was not my best. I was really good at jumping. But here's the funny thing. The language was to hold your balance. So I would put my hand on a bar and then I would hold my balance and I would really work hard on holding, and it did not work very well. And I took this workshop And the teacher used his hands to guide me gently. And instead of holding, I ended up lengthening and widening and kind of floating. And all of a sudden, my balance improved so markedly. I really wanted to figure out what had just happened, because it was so much easier and it worked so much better. My curiosity was piqued. So what I want you to know about this work, based on Mr. Alexander's discoveries, is they help us feel and function at our best. And fundamentally, what we have to change first is the most important tool. It's our thinking. So that's the adventure we're going to go on. And I'm going to show you a little bit about Mr. Alexander. Aha. So I want to show you. Just give us a quick thumbs up if you can see my shared screen. Terrific. Thank you. So I love this picture of a little one. This is the kind of move that makes most mothers super anxious. But I just want you to notice that baby is not startled. That baby is got a look of wonder and glee and is completely upright and trusting. And I want you to know that we all started that way. Most of us aren't feeling so much like that, perhaps especially now in the time of pandemic, but I want to remind us that we all started like that. And then I have a theory. I have a theory about what happened to us. And I personally think that having us sit still all day long from the time we were quite small, and this notion about working hard and concentrating started doing this to us. So this beautiful little boy is biting his tongue. His shoulders are up by his ears, and he's concentrating. I think he's working on Legos. Yes? But what I want you to know is that biting your tongue and raising your shoulders does not help the Legos fit together. It doesn't help the math problem. It doesn't help prepare your taxes. It doesn't help you open a jar. But somewhere along the line, we start doing that. Now, the good news about this little boy is when he gets up from the table, he probably lets all that go and goes on to the next thing. Unfortunately, most of us don't. We hang on to that. That's why as a dancer in college, I had more and more tension. So now I want to tell you about this guy. This is a picture of Frederick Matthias Alexander, and he was born in Australia. I think it was 1869. And he was a young actor. His aspiration was to be a great orator of his time. He specialized in Shakespearean monologues. And as a young man on stage, he ran into a problem. And his problem was that he began to lose his voice while on stage. Now, this would be a terrible challenge to an actor. And in fact, when I go around the country teaching masterclasses to singers, I often will ask, how many of you have ever lost your voice on stage? And I'm so sad to tell you that the average response that I get from that question is usually about half the hands in the room go up, which is shocking to me. I hope it's shocking to you. And so I'm going to ask right now if any of you have ever had a problem losing your voice. So you can go to the reactions and raise your hand if that's ever happened to you. I find even if you're not an actor or singer, loud restaurants, remember when we used to go to those? That often is a time that kind of challenges people. So Mr. Alexander wasn't alone. But what happened was he went to seek medical advice, of course, and they couldn't find anything wrong with his vocal apparatus. So they advised him to go home and rest. So he did, and when he rested, his voice returned. Great. Problem was, when he got back on stage, the problem reoccurred. So here's what I want you to know about this story. Quite remarkably, Mr. Alexander decided that it must be something he did while he was reciting. So I'm going to update the language a little bit. He decided that it must be a software issue, not a hardware issue. If the equipment is fine, but it fails when he goes to recite, it must be something he does as he recites, something in what he later called the means whereby, how he went about reciting. And that was a startling kind of pivot in his story, because so many times we go and we want someone to give us a pill or give us an operation to make the equipment, fix the equipment for me. Now, I'm not saying you don't need to do that. There's certainly a time and a place for a hip replacement, and thank goodness we have those. What I want you to know is that there's a whole nother component about how you're using your movement and how quickly that wears out that hip. Are you with me so far? Give me a thumbs up if I'm making sense to you so far. I'm not used to teaching when I can't hear people, so I appreciate your feedback. Thank you. Awesome. So here we are. We have Mr. Alexander. He's a young man. He's decided it must be something I'm doing. So he decided to watch himself. He says, well, I'm going to figure out what I do. So he sat in front of 3 mirrors and he watched himself recite. And what I want you to know is that what he noticed was absolutely nothing. Not a thing. Now, think about this. Did you get up this morning and brush your teeth in front of a mirror? How much did you notice? It's so normal to you, you probably didn't really notice anything. And that's what happened to Mr. Alexander. The act of reciting seemed so normal to him, his habit snuck under the radar. But luckily for us and for him, he did not stop there. He was a young man of great perseverance, so he kept watching, and he kept watching, and he kept watching. And suddenly he was able to see the moment right before he went to recite. The moment right before he began to recite is what he later called the critical moment. It's the moment in which we prepare to do something. And this is what his critical moment looked like. Try it with me. Did you ever get super excited about a story and go, oh yeah, right? Yeah, of course you have. So do that with me, please, right? So if you gasp, I want you to feel what happens to the muscles in your neck. Can you feel them tighten? Give me a thumbs up if you can feel them tighten. Right? And I also want you to watch the movement of my head relative to my torso. Can you see my head is actually tilting back, and it's also drawing down into my body? So he went, oh my goodness, I'm tightening right where my vocal apparatus lives, and no wonder that causes me to lose my voice. So he thought he was done. He said, great, all I have to do is not do that. So he said, I'm not going to pull my head back, and I'm going to recite. And he did it. And he kept repeating his habit, because I want to tell you something. We are very good at repeating our habits. It is very easy to do what you have practiced most. And the truth is, you've practiced your habit a lot. So he called that little movement of his head going back and down and constricting right in his neck, he called that a pattern of interference. Now I'm going to update his language a little bit. I'm a choreographer, don't forget. I'm trained as a dancer, so I'm a creative soul. And I like to call that like putting the emergency brake on in your car and then hitting the gas. So anyone ever do that? We've all done that, right? So here's the funny thing. You can get the car to go, but boy, it doesn't handle very well. And it really wastes a lot of gas. And it for sure wears out your brakes and your tires. So we would agree that's not very efficient. It's also not very fun. So sometimes I like to describe this work as we're freeing up your Ferrari, because a Ferrari surely drives better without the parking brake on. You with me? So we have Mr. Alexander's story. He's discovered his habits of interference. Then he had years more to develop. how to actually stop the unwanted pattern and direct himself into buoyant balance. So what I also want to tell you about his story is not only did he regain his voice, he also got much healthier in this kind of systemic way that he had no way to anticipate. Because when you put the parking brake on the Ferrari, on your Ferrari, you're interfering with all of your systems. And I don't mean just mechanically. We are human beings. I am not a body worker. I work with human beings. So I think your creative system and your empathic system, as well as your circulatory system and your respiratory system, I think all of your systems work better when they're not hindered. So Mr. Alexander was interested in what he called psychophysical coordination, which if I update the language, we would probably call mind-body now. Yes? So I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint. And, there he is. This is a picture of FM, by the way, well into his 80s. It's kind of cool to see how elegant he was. So the tortoise, aha. This is one of my favorite ways to talk about patterns of interference. So if you've ever seen a tortoise, or if you can imagine one, if you startle a tortoise, it disappears into its shell. Yes? And what I want you to know about that is that not only does his head disappear, but simultaneously the tortoise withdraws its limbs. Yes? So its head, its tail, and its limbs all disappear into its shell. Now that's called its startle response. And I gotta tell you something, we have one too. Yes? And as I like to point out, there is much to be startled by. I don't know if you've been reading the news lately, but it's a little startling, yes? So I want you very gently, don't pick the most startling thing in your life. Pick something sort of kind of medium, all right? Maybe you're worried about something arriving in time or something not too scary. And I want you to think about it for a second. And I just want you to notice if you can feel any tightening of your neck, if you can feel that little drawing of your head into your shoulders, and you might even feel your shoulders come up, because when your arms come in, that'll make your shoulders rise. If you keep paying attention, you might even notice your legs got a little tight, or your back got a little tight. So now we're going to come out of that. So now I want you to remember being in the most beautiful place you've ever been. I was so fortunate. I got to climb a mountain in Borneo in February, right before lockdown. And I got to climb above the clouds. So I'm thinking about that beautiful vista. For you, it might be the ocean or a mountaintop. Maybe it's your reading nook at home. Maybe it's looking into the face of a loved one. And just notice if your neck feels different. Notice if your arms and legs feel a little bit more spacious. So all we're doing is noticing a response to the stimulus of an idea. So by nature, some things are more startling, yes? And by habit, we will respond. But just like that little boy that was all scrunched up to do his Legos, we want to reclaim the buoyancy to come back out. Because when the tortoise comes out of its shell, I love to demonstrate this. It's kind of fun if you want to do it with me, if you have a sense of playfulness in you today. If you scrunch all in, please do it gently so you don't hurt yourself. I'm going to ask you to try to just pop your head out, to look around. It's really kind of comical. It doesn't work very well. And what I want you to feel is that your head wants to go right back in where the rest of you is, right? So now let's try another variation. Gently scrunch in. Please don't hurt yourself. Now try to send your arms out. Try to send your arms out without sending anything else out. Again, it's kind of funky. Doesn't work so well. And your arms kind of want to come back in, don't they? Now, I like to make fun gently. I like to tease people. And actors and musicians do this thing. Dancers do it too, where they try to get rid of tension with their arms. You ever see anyone do that? Maybe you've been sitting at the computer, right? And you're trying to get your wrists open, and you might do that. But here's the funny thing. You're not built like that, so it won't work very well. The way you're built is like the tortoise. So when the tortoise comes out of its shell, its head emerges away from its tail as its arms emerge and legs, all simultaneously. And if you do that along with me, I can already see in a few of you, that looks different. So if it felt different, give me a thumbs up, please, because I want to see how that goes for you. A couple of thumbs up. Here they come. Good. So here's the funny thing. Maybe it didn't feel any different to you. And I want your honesty. Okay? I don't want you to believe anything I say. What I want to elicit is your curiosity. So if you couldn't feel a difference, I want you to honestly put your thumb up. Thank you. I appreciate that honesty. Thank you so much. That's how we're going to learn together. Great. So I have a very simple answer. I want you to know, rules of the road, I don't know is a completely fair answer. But if you'll remember Mr. Alexander's story, do you remember what he noticed at first? Nothing. He noticed nothing. But what did he do? Did he give up? Nope. He repeated the experiment. So that's what we're going to do. That's the template for learning in this class. So I'm going to ask you to gently draw your head into your body as you let your arms and legs gently scrunch in, right? And then you're going to try to just stretch your arms out and see how that feels without releasing anything else, and bring it in. And then try to poke your head out to look around without releasing anything else, and let it come back in. And now, the instantaneous moment that you release your head away, your tail goes the opposite way, and your arms and your legs go out and away, out and away. So we emerge from our tortoise shell simultaneously in all directions. All right, let's take another count. Thumbs up if that felt different to you.
Ariel, someone requested that you repeat those instructions again because they weren't quite sure what you wanted them to do.
Thank you, Gail.
Mm-hmm.
So the instruction is that instead of trying to release one part, like my hands away, yes, or one part trying to stretch my head somewhere, that I simultaneously allow my head to free away from my tail as my arms and legs free out and away from my torso. So I'm saying your torso is like the tortoise shell, and that like the tortoise, we go simultaneously away in all directions. So for the person that asked for those repeated instructions, can you let us know if that was sufficient, or if I need to explain it another way, you let me know, okay?
And Ariel, someone else wanted to know if they're supposed to be sitting or standing.
Either is fine right now, wherever you're more comfortable. I'm sitting today, but it doesn't really make a difference. I could do this standing. I'll show you standing just so you can see it. So if I contract myself, yes, this doesn't look very welcoming. As a matter of fact, there's a very iconic picture of someone doing that, where his whole body was scrunched, but his hands were up here. You might remember that picture, yes. So I'm, thank you. I got some applause, right? So I can't, it doesn't really work to try to shake my hands out, right? Sorry. And then some people like Alexander technique is a lot about head bounce, so they try to put their head somewhere. But I want you to see that doesn't change the whole system. But the minute I think simultaneously head, tail, arms, and legs, when I emerge from my tortoiseshell simultaneously in all directions, then I get a systemic change that's more sustainable. So here's the funny thing. I've been studying that for the last 40 years, and it's just getting good. So what I want you to know is there's so much Ferrari in you that you don't know about, that decide it's fun to explore that. Like, I don't mean to frustrate you. So if this isn't quite making sense yet, I just want to take you right back to the story about Mr. Alexander and say, repeat the experiment. Bring your curiosity, because guess what? There's buoyant balance inside of you that you're not using. You unwittingly have the parking brake on and you don't even know it. And my delight is to show you how to disengage the parking brake. So let's go back, because I think my next slide, is to tell you about tensegrity. So tensegrity is a term that was coined by Buckminster Fuller that is about a very strong and flexible model, yes, with suspended struts, right? So this is not a stacked building with a foundation with walls, right? This is a different, and actually I forgot to grab my toy. I'll be right back, don't go anywhere. So this is my tensegrity model. And they also make children's toys, which are super fun. But I want you to see what happens when I compress. My tensegrity model collapses. Yes? But here's what I also want you to notice. The moment I cease compressing, my model springs back to its full volume. Mr. Alexander called that in us our full stature. Yes? So the action is the compressing, right? Then I don't do this, I don't pull on the strut to get it to open back up. All I have to do is stop compressing and it springs back on its own. Now, it's hard for us to believe that this is actually how we are, because most of us don't feel that springy anymore. Most of us don't feel that buoyant anymore. But we're 70-something% water. So I assure you, even though we are losing fluids as we age, I assure you there is a lot of springy buoyancy in you that you have stopped tapping into. You forgot about it. But it's there, it's hidden. And so like archaeologists, we're gonna uncover it. But it makes a difference, because if you're thinking like a little house, you know, so many times in a fitness class or a yoga class, they'll ask us to stack from the bottom up. So I'm gonna ask you to do a little experiment with me. So we are gonna stand up for a moment. So earlier, I asked you to think different things. I asked you to think about something that was a little more challenging. And then I asked you to think about something super beautiful, beautiful place you've been. And I was getting you in the practice of starting to notice the physical response. Because we always physicalize our response. We are always moving in response to what we're thinking. Now, the movement might be super small and might seem really subtle to you, like that little tightening of your neck. But we are always moving and embodying a response to what we're thinking. So here's our next experiment. I want you to give me your best posture. I want you to put your feet underneath your hips, and I want you to put your hips over your ankles, and I want you to put your shoulders, and I want you to stand tall. So I'm going to call that a stacked model, And there's a lot of good things about that model. I don't mean to diss any of your teachers. Yes? I'm just here because I have some opinions and some experience with a slightly different model. Yes? So I want you to kind of give a number. You can put it right in the chat. 10 is going to be the freest you've ever felt in your entire life. And 1 is going to be the tightest you've ever felt. So 1 is my parking brake is completely engaged. I can't move. Right? So I'm stacking from the bottom. I'm standing tall. Right? And I want you to put some numbers in the chat, please. 10 is the freest. And 1 is the tightest. And this is super interesting because the numbers are really all over the place, which is great because we're not all the same. Terrific. You ready for an experiment? So now, instead of thinking from the bottom, you're going to find where your head nods on top of your spine. So if you put your fingers right in where your ears are and nod, that's where your head rests on your spine. And you're going to simultaneously let that place float up to the ceiling as your feet go into the floor and your arms go out towards your hands. So that's the tortoise simultaneously expanding away from your center. My feet go into the floor, my head rises up, and my back widens so my arms go towards my hands. Great. Now, give me another number, please. 10 is the freest, and 1 is the tightest. And then I want you to say, did you get freer or did you get tighter? Just because we're not going to be able to track all 260 people's, how their numbers changed. So when we simultaneously free away, did you get freer or tighter? Freer, 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 freer. This is making me happy. You're getting my happy dance, guys. Wow, that's like kind of impressive. That's amazing. I'm not seeing 1 tighter. Could not follow what I was saying. I apologize, Karen. So I'll tell you what, Karen, I'm going to repeat because guess what? This is an experiment is worthy of repeating. So here we go. We're going to repeat the same experiment. What I'm showing you today is that we always physicalize. We always respond in movement to what we're thinking. It might be micro movement, but we're always responding. And I want you to start to play with your ability to change that response. That's really the essence of Mr. Alexander's discoveries. So we're going to stack. We're going to stand up straight. We're going to talk about that next week. But you're going to start at the bottom and feel your feet firmly planted on the ground. And then you're going to stack your hips over your ankles. You're going to stack your shoulders over your hips. And then you're going to make sure your head is upright. So we're starting at the bottom and we're sequentially moving up. I'm calling that the stacked model. And I want you to feel how free, how able to move. Here, we're going to add to the experiment. I want you to go from this model and stand on 1 leg, please. See if you can tap a foot or balance on 1 leg. Please be safe. If you know that's too challenging, hang on to something when you check your balance, please, right? But I want you to test your balance because that will be a good tell. Okay. Ready for our next experiment? Instead of stacking sequentially from the bottom, we're going to think simultaneously from the very top movable joint here, which I called your nodding joints. Their anatomical name is your atlanto-occipital joints, in case you need to know. But your nodding joints are going to simultaneously float up as your feet lightly go down, as your back extends and your hands move away. So my hands are towards the floor, so they're just moving lightly towards the floor. So simultaneously, the tortoise is releasing out and away, that decompressing. And then go ahead and shift your weight and test your balance again. So give me a thumbs up if your balance improved when you did the tortoise emerging from the shell simultaneously in all directions. I'm getting some thumbs up here. Someone wants to know how you breathe when you do this. I appreciate that question. That's interesting. Someone said they were doing better because they weren't trying as hard. And that's exactly what I experienced as a young dancer. I'm seeing a couple people say they can't follow. And if you would give me a little bit more information, if I need to speak more slowly. If you can give me a little more information. Someone said the stacking model reminds them of posture day in grade school. Well, sadly, they still teach it that way. So I study West Coast swing dancing, which is social dancing. And I can't tell you how many workshops I've been to where the teacher asks us to lean against a wall and then says, step away from the wall, as if you could dance like that. Let's do that another day. But sadly, that's still how posture is being taught. But I don't think it works well, and I don't want you to believe me. I've been teaching 32 years. It's just getting good. I'm just getting good at what I do. It's getting better every day. But if you just believe me, you won't involve yourself in the process, which is how Mr. Alexander made discoveries. The process he engaged in was one of self-discovery. And to do that, you have to pay attention to yourself, and you have to run the experiment. And just like scientists, they don't run the experiment once, guys. They have to repeat the experiment and repeat the experiment. And that's how you cultivate your sensitivity to your own movement. So what might seem subtle to you today, if you keep at it, we get better at what we practice. That's how you got good at your downward pull pattern of interference, and that's how you're going to get good at something else.
Ariel, someone had a question about how to hold their hips when they stand straight. They didn't know if their hips should be tight or loose.
My short answer is loose. There is no reason to grip in there. And if you'll bear with me, that's actually on the docket for week 3. So I'm going to encourage you to come back. But my short answer is that your hips don't need to be tight to be stable. That in fact, if you expand in all directions, the postural tone that's appropriate will actually kind of show up. But you know what? I can never resist an experiment. So let's do another experiment. Let's stand up. I love questions, by the way. See, I tried to put it off and I couldn't do it. So I taught at the Academy of Vocal Arts many years ago. And a singer said that he was taught to squeeze his glutes, his tush together. And some people are taught that for stability. Put a thumb up if you've ever been taught to do that. Kind of squeeze your glutes together. So I want you to go ahead and squeeze your glutes and then go ahead and balance. I can do it. I've spent years doing this, right? But now we're going to try the tortoise. So as my head moves away from my tail and away from my feet, what I want is my hips to fit in between. So if I squeeze my glutes and I push forward, my shoulders are behind my hips. So if I actually move my head away and let my hips float somewhere in between, when I balance, I'm actually much more stable and not rigid. I'm curious if you can feel that difference. So I'm still getting you to notice that when you change the thought, when you change the strategy, it changes the movement. Yes, most of us are different side to side. Thank you for that comment. But in a funny way, we don't want to train to feel the same on some side, but we do want to train for the same strategy. But that's something we can address. I'm so glad your balance is improving. And it's only week 1, guys. We get 5 more weeks at this. I think my next screen actually is talking right about what I'm talking about. Ah, look at that. Exactly what I wanted to talk about. So I love to talk about tightrope walkers because, like me, as people worry about their balance, a lot of people try to hold their balance, right? And they tighten up. But what I really want you to know is that balance is movement. It's micro movement, but it's movement. So it's also one of my favorite things to demonstrate. I actually was vacationing in Montreal, I guess it was a couple years ago now, and I was in a park and there was a guy on a slack line, which is like a very low tightrope, and I was so excited because I really wanted to try, and he gave me a little lesson because I've been talking about tightrope walkers for years, and it was really fun to try to use what I know. I wasn't terribly good at it, to be honest, but you know, I would have to practice more. But this is what I want to demonstrate. If I was mimicking a tightrope walker and I tightened my glutes and I tightened my shoulders and I tried to balance, I look like Frankenstein, right? Or if I tried to hold, I would actually fall off. If you can remember what a tightrope walker looks like, yes, they use a very long a long pole. And then there's a lot of movement, yes? Can you see all that micro movement? So I'm allowing the balance to happen by allowing the micro movement. And I don't know if you can see, but my head is actually kind of staying in the middle, and I'm letting everything underneath my head balance. So I want to shift our paradigm to thinking that you have to hold your balance to one that I have to allow balance. So that's the same model that I take the parking brake off the Ferrari, yes? And I allow that movement to happen simultaneously out of the tortoise shell. I hope that's making sense to you. I can see Gail. Did you see she was checking it out in the back? Good for you, which is awesome. Gail, that's what I want to say to all of you. This is an experiment to have such a big class. And again, I want to thank Friends Life Care for this opportunity. But when they asked me if I wanted to teach a smaller class, I didn't really want to limit the exposure. It seemed like a wonderful opportunity to share this work. But what that means is I can't follow along and see how each of you individually is doing. That's not possible with so many of you. But here's the funny thing. I want and encourage you to follow along. So when I give a suggestion, I'm going to invite you to keep experimenting with me. Go ahead and try it. Every time I talk about your head freeing away and your arms freeing away, I can see some of you doing that with me. And that's how you'll learn, because we're going to get good at what we practice together. So.
Ariel, do you see the question that somebody asked? Are you saying that you hold your glutes tight is good for posture or not good?
I am not saying that.
Okay.
You do not need to stabilize by forcing in. I'm not saying you don't need good postural tone either, but what I'm saying is if you get yourself moving out and away, the appropriate amount of postural tone will arrive, as opposed to clenching down on your glutes. But please don't believe me. What I want you to do is the experiment. If you grip your glutes and try to balance, I want you to see if that works better than expanding out and away and seeing what happens. That's what got me going 40-something years ago to want to be an Alexander teacher. So by all means, do the experiment. All right.
So, and Ariel, I just wanted to say one more thing for anyone that joined us late. Just to be able to see what Ariel's doing, just be sure that you have your screen in speaker view and not gallery view. It should be up on the top right where you have a choice to select the view. I just wanted to be sure that everyone could see you.
Thank you so much, Gail. Okay, so we're at one of my favorite things to teach. I keep saying I have a lot of favorites, don't I? It's a good thing I only had one child. I don't know how to have so many favorites. But I coined this term, baby wonder, when a very dear friend came to visit with her daughter and grandson. And Ben was just about this age, maybe a year and a half old. And my poor friend didn't get any sleep because Ben was very interested. Actually, Ben stayed in this room. This is my teaching space. I'm just going to show you. I have lofted ceilings in this space. Can you see? And there's a fan and see the lights? It's a very high space. And so Ben wouldn't go to sleep at night because he was doing this. He was mesmerized by the fan and the windows, and he kept looking around, right? Because that's what babies do. Have you noticed that? So I want you to notice that if I just move my eyes, I don't look like a baby, right? Or if I move my eyes and my head, I don't look like a baby, right? If I want to look like a baby, my eyes lead my head, and then my whole body follows. So I invite you to try those 3 variations with me. First, just move your eyes. This actually will cause a little bit of eye strain, so only do a little bit. Now you're going to look, but consciously don't let your torso move. Put it in a straitjacket and just move your head. Do it gently because that's going to cause your neck to pull. You're going to get a pull at the border of what's moving and what's not. So now our 3rd variation is the moment your eyes start to look somewhere, your whole body is ready, willing, and able to go with you. Now, I don't know about you, but I have a funny feeling you learned to drive in a similar era that I did. And my mother used to make a great fuss about me looking over my shoulder. And what I notice is most people stop doing that because they don't feel comfortable looking over their shoulder anymore. And it's because of this very thing. They're looking and they're not letting their body follow. And can you see I ran out of room and it looks pretty uncomfortable, right? So I'm hardly driving right now, but when I do, the minute my eyes start to look over my shoulder, I let my whole body follow. And then I want you to see I went a lot further and more comfortably. I'm curious if you can feel a difference. I see a big smile. Oh, that's so cool. Someone was talking about balancing on a railroad rail using that micro movement. That's cool. Great, I see some thumbs up. Thank you for that. That helps keep me in touch with all of you. We are a big crowd today. So this baby wonder, so I just nicknamed it Baby Wonder because I love babies and I love watching babies. And I'm that person that when I'm around one, I just kind of like sit next to them and kind of soak them in. But when you're sitting at your computer, because it's an extraordinary time, most of us are spending much more time in front of a screen because maybe you're working and socializing on a screen, or maybe you're taking other courses. Yes, it's a lot of time to be in front of a screen. And a lot of us are feeling kind of tight and maybe a little cranky about that. This little break, Baby Wonder, can be like a little movement. I call it a movement refreshment. You know how you take a little mint after a meal to refresh your breath? Well, this little guided mindful movement can help get some of the kinks out. Now, remember my rule, don't believe me, right? So we're gonna do a little experiment. I think we have time for one more. So here's what I see most people do when they're sitting and they feel tight. They do something like this. So thumbs up if that's you. Thank you for your honesty. So we're gonna try that. I want you to do your best pulley stretch, because we've been sitting a while, and then give it a number in the comments. Like, how much freer do you feel when you do that? 10 is the freest, 1 is the tightest. Okay. Not sure. Thank you for that honesty. So you know my answer to that. I don't know is completely fair answer. Repeat the experiment. Do all that. And then give it a number. I'm going to give mine a 4. And now we're going to do baby wonder. So the wonder is to wonder about the room around you. So as my eyes look, my head follows, and then sometimes I ask people to put like an imaginary eyeball on their sternum. So make sure your whole body, all the way to the chair, all the way to the floor if you're standing, is following where your eye is looking. So as I look around, that sense, I can still smell Ben when he was 2. He was looking around this space and he was just taking it all in. And then come on back to the screen. And then write in the comments, does this feel freer than when you yanked on yourself? Or does it feel tighter? Or does it feel the same? Freer, freer, freer. Oh my goodness. Nice. Yay! Someone said yay. You're gonna get my happy dance. Much freer. Definitely freer. When your back cracks. So to be honest, I like to always be honest about what I know and I don't know. I don't really know what that means when your back cracks. I've seen chiropractors over the years and I've paid money to crack my back. But if that cracking is happening as its own, because it's releasing movement, I think it's fine in my experience. I don't recommend that you go for the crack. Can you see that I tightened and compressed to do that? But if I'm doing baby wonder and I get a crack, usually I find that's okay. Great. Well done, everyone. I'm going to give you all some snaps because that means your experiments are already productive. You already have a tool in your toolkit. So if for some reason you're feeling fatigued or tight, right? So let's say my shoulder's tight, right? Instead of yanking on my shoulder, right, to get it to stretch out, I'm going to give you a Pepsi challenge. Remember those days, guys, the Pepsi challenge? Which is to say, oh, my shoulder's hurting. That's the stimulus. So my habit is to like yank on it, but I'm going to try something new today. I'm going to do an experiment. And I'm going to let my eyes leave my head, and then my hands move away and my legs move away. And then I just see if my shoulder actually feels better from not thinking about my shoulder, but thinking about the whole. So I just did a little hybrid move. For baby wonder, I used the tortoise coming out of the shell simultaneously in all directions. Did you notice I snuck it in there on you? Great. So that's something you can start practicing. And next week when we come back together, you can let me know how it goes. I think we're almost at the end of my PowerPoint, which is good because we're running out of time. Look at that. Amazing that I did that. I want to make a little time for questions. I'll leave this up just for one more little minute because I want to encourage all of you. I might as well do this now while I think of it. to join my mailing list. So my mailing list is on my website. It's atphila.com. And if you have questions, feel free to email me. My email is ariel@atphila.com. And if you're on social media, I have both Instagram and Facebook. The Facebook is Alexander Technique Philadelphia. And my Instagram is AT_Phila.
But anyway, we're almost finished, and I was just wondering if you could just answer a few questions that people have.
I would love to do that. And my apologies, everyone. I have no idea what just happened.
Yeah, someone asked if you could put your information on chat, and it is at the very top of the chat. If you scroll up to the top of the box, you'll see Ariel's information there.
All the way up, and I put it right there for you all.
Yes. Yeah, and the class is from 10 to 11 for the next five more weeks. Someone had asked a question back in the beginning about a good posture for texting, because they said they start feeling a little crunchy after a couple texts.
Yes. Well, funny you should ask, because that's actually now a medical diagnosis, text neck. And we are absolutely going to talk about that. Right now, it's kind of on the docket for week number 3. We're going to talk about sitting and standing. Next week, we're going to talk about posture myth busting, because so much of the time what we're doing to fix our posture actually makes it worse. And I don't want you to believe me, but come back next week. I'm going to talk about it. And I'll try to give you a little bit of a hint next week about that.
Okay, excellent. And someone said that they can't see your contact information if they joined late, so maybe you could type that in again, at the very end of the class, like how people can reach you if they missed your screen. And also, somebody had a comment that a common thing seems to be the simultaneity, the moving all parts at once. Sorry, I butchered that word. You're moving. It's like simultaneously. You're moving everything simultaneously. Moving all your parts at once seems to kind of be the key to the free movement instead of moving one part at a time. So that was just a comment that someone had.
Yes, today was mostly about simultaneity and this idea that we're getting out of the way instead of kind of pushing on ourselves.
Right.
That's where I was starting our story. Yes.
Right. Excellent. And then someone else just wanted to clarify the breath, and doesn't the breath make a difference in how you feel and how you move?
Absolutely. So the interesting thing about Mr. Alexander was his very first published article back in the 1800s was about respiratory re-education. And before we called it the Alexander technique, FM Alexander was known as the breathing man. And remember I said he kind of improved his overall health, not just his vocal production. He actually was a sickly young man, and he had a lot of respiratory issues. And what he found is that when he kind of unhinged himself, his respiratory ailments went away. And it's been super fun in my 32 years of teaching to help people. I've helped a couple of people with really severe asthma, and I do not cure asthma. No one cures asthma, right? But when you take the parking brake off the Ferrari, it drives better. So when my student could get up the 4 flights of her house without wheezing when she got to the top, she was pretty happy. Didn't matter that it didn't fix the asthma. But what I'm trying to say is that in Alexander technique, we don't necessarily direct the breathing, we direct the overall coordination. So if you're holding your breath, that would be something like this, guys. So if I compress my model and then I hold part of it and let part of it go, the whole thing won't spring. I have to let my breathing respond, right? But I'll kind of add that into my notes to talk a little bit more about breathing. Yes, breathing is fundamental. It's the first thing you learned how to do when you came into this world. And when you don't interfere with it, I guarantee it works better, no matter how compromised your breathing is. Someone says if you double click on my screen, you'll be able to see me. It's just about 11, Gail. Do we have another question, or should we wrap up?
I think that is it.
Well, I want to thank you all for being here. I do hope you'll come back next week, and I really hope you'll do some experimenting and try your baby wonder and coming out of your tortoise shell. And then if you have a moment in your week that seems particularly tricky where you can't figure that out, jot it down. You can send me an email or you can put it in the chat next time I see you. And by all means, stay safe, everyone. It's been a delight to spend this hour with you.
Thank you very much, Ariel. That was wonderful. I think we all learned a lot. Everyone have a great week. We'll see you next week. Take care.
You're very welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.